Welcome to episode 4 of Dial the Gate. My name is David Reed. I've got Joe Flanigan here waiting in the wings. Thanks so much for everyone in the chat for pointing out that I have no sound, but we should be broadcasting right now. There we go. Thank you for everyone who's online already. We're at 243 guests and counting. So what's first going to happen here is that I'm going to bring Joe in. I'm going to have a line of questioning for him. It sounds like an interrogation, but it's not, trust me. And then we're going to invite the fan community to ask questions of their own. And then, we'll see where it goes. One of the things that we must keep in mind yesterday with 150 people simultaneously in the chat is that not everyone got to get their questions asked. And we're going to fix that with this one as best we can by inviting everyone to only ask one question. So make it good. So when you post it in the chat, one question, and then that's the last that the moderators are going to take from you. Thank you to Summer, and thank you to Tracy for being online right now to take care of that. Without further ado, let's bring in the man of the hour himself, Mr. Joe Flanigan, sir. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you dealing with this quarantine?
I mean, you be the judge of yourself.
Yeah.
I showed up unshaven. Listen, it is, I'm not going to lie to you. It's far more difficult than I thought. And what occurred to me, and Jason and I both kind of realized, is like, we're not really adults. We're in adult bodies, but we're just children that are, with ADD. We're like restless children with ADD. So locking us in a confined space is it's not advisable. It's dangerous, maybe.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, you got to keep yourself occupied with toys and, taking interviews and whatever else that you can do, while you're just dealing with the madness that is the current reality. How long have you been in confinement for C?
Today's day 10. Yeah. So what I've been doing, like these type of things help, like a little window into the world where there's human beings doing things. But, I've been doing a live stream every day at 2 p.m. East Coast time just to reach out. And I thought it would be entertaining to see just like the portrait of a man slowly unraveling. And so people will, it might be like watching a car crash. Who knows?
In gradual slow motion. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been helping me stay sane.
Okay.
But other than that, I want to say that this is excessive, but then I'm not a medical expert. And when I talk to people who do know what they're talking about,
we don't know, and if we don't know, what's wrong with taking a few precautions? So, I mean, if you're willing to do the work, I'm just so thankful that production has restarted in so many places, and that we're trying to find a happy medium to make it work.
Well, that's exactly right. Because when I said to the lady here in production, I said, God, 14-day quarantine, that seems excessive. She said, well, we're working. I mean, you guys aren't really working down there. Yeah. So whatever allows us to work. And I couldn't argue that.
Yeah.
I couldn't argue that. That's true.
I've been speaking with a number of your peers getting ready to start this. And you've got people all across the spectrum. I want to work, but I'm having trouble finding work. In your case, we're working, but there's a holding pattern. And then others are like, I just don't think it's safe right now. And so we're all trying to, hindsight's 2020, we're going to be looking back on these few years,
right?
Studied years for years and years. But I mean, where we're at right now, everyone's got to be smart, follow their doctor's instructions based on their own health, and do the best that they can with the information that they've been given. So,
yeah. Hey, listen, I thought that this pandemic was going to be the unifying element that made us realize we were all in the same boat together. And how wrong was I? I didn't realize it would be politicized and everybody's going to start questioning the science and stuff. So that's a little unfortunate.
Yeah.
And, but this thing is going to go on until springtime. So maybe we'll recalibrate and realize that we are all in it together. So who knows?
I completely hope that that's the case. So tell us about C. So you're in day 10 of 14. How long is production for you? And what can you tell us?
I have been told that I can't tell anybody about anything on sea, so I really apologize.
Okay.
But so I mean, they're very tight-lipped about this, and you have to sign, non-disclosure agreements and stuff like that. So I can't really talk about it, but basically, I did a couple episodes before the quarantine, and this is just picking up where that left off.
So you've already been on the show. I have not seen it yet.
Well, I have started on their season two, but I don't know when they give season 2 out.
Got it.
I have no. I think they save it all, get it shot, get it in the can, and then release it. But so I'll be doing a few more episodes for they only shoot 6 episodes a season, and I do a few more, and then maybe a few more for season 3. That's about it.
Do you like the role?
Yeah, it's fun.
No, David, I hate the role. I just do it to get a paycheck and to spend time with my buddy. So.
Well, I tell you, it is interesting. I can probably talk about this, which is you have to go through sensory training because everybody's blind. And so you realize that your cues are always audible. They're auditory. So you turn and you look at things. So you have to train yourself to, or they're visual, but you have to train yourself to turn to auditory cues only and be like you're hearing things and stuff. So I spent the day with this one guy who's blind, and we went walking around. He had to put a thing on you, and you go walking around with him, and it's fascinating. What's fascinating is how they use the sensory elements that they have with such greater precision than we do.
I mean, the blind?
He can walk into a room, and by tapping, he can kind of tell how big it is. Just by the echo and stuff, he can kind of get a feel for the thing, and it's amazing that we rely really heavily on the senses that come easily to us. So we're not very auditory; we're more visual.
That's crazy. So how has it been to share this the stage, as it were, with Jason again?
Jason and I actually, weirdly enough, haven't worked together yet.
Really?
No, that has not happened yet, which is, I think, kind of interesting.
Okay, so it's a bigger palette than just him and what he's seeing, and I haven't seen season 1. So what do you think of the show?
I like the show. It's a big production. It's really amazing and impressive, and I recommend anybody get through the first 2 or 3 episodes because it really gets going. And after 2 or 3 episodes, you get hooked, and it's a big, epic adventure. So yeah, you should check it out.
Leave it to Apple to produce, some top-notch quality content. So I wouldn't have expected otherwise. Yeah,
they have the pockets to put into production value.
Did you know that Apple was interested in acquiring SG-1 for a season 11?
I did not know that.
Yeah, before Arc of Truth, they were considering picking it up. So before Arc of Truth and Continuum.
That was before they really launched out.
Exactly. That's right. That was 10 years ago, something like that.
That was before they even had a platform. So that's kind of interesting. I wonder how they would have done that.
So with this show, with Dial the Gate, my intention here is to be the archive of American television for Stargate. We're on YouTube. This is humanity's visual record, probably for the next multiple decades. Right. As new fans discover the show, I want to create a space for them to come to see the oral history, to watch people discuss episodes from the entire franchise from all aspects of production. So that's my intent here. So my hope is that after we're finished with this episode, a few months down the line, you'd be willing to come back and talk about a few more episodes from the show,
of course,
going through the series. So I really appreciate you being here.
Happy to. Happy to be of service.
Did you always know that you? But let's take a step back before Stargate. Let's specifically focus on you, and I want to focus on the people that made you who you are, your personal heroes, and the people who inspired you to become the guy that you are. But did you always know that you wanted to act?
No, not at all. Acting came almost by accident. So it was interesting. I was I worked, some people know this, but I worked in, it's a backwards trajectory where most people kind of grow up and work harder. I actually started working hard and was disciplined, and I was like, till I finally ended up in Hollywood.
What did you do?
I was pretty disciplined. So each summer I was like really, I grew up on this ranch farm like environment, and we did a lot of manual labor and stuff. Like we were outdoors all the time, and I went away to school and so forth. But I spent the summers doing internships. So I worked at Dean Witter Reynolds. I worked at Wells Fargo. I worked in. I apologize.
You're fine.
I thought
Don't
this
worry
was
about
turned
it.
off.
Yeah, welcome to my life. I thought it was turned on.
I'm trying to figure out, I should have a kid blocker because it's my kids who always call. And I know what they want. They want money. They always want money. Hey, Dad, you want money? They're like, no, I just called to say hi.
Oh, sure.
Can I borrow $50? Yeah. So anyways, I worked in Wells Fargo, and then I worked in Washington, D.C. as an intern. And it kind of culminated in a job that was pretty interesting, short-lived but interesting, which was I was an advance man for George Bush Sr. An advance man is somebody who goes out and organizes trips. So if George Bush was going to Los Angeles or London or whatever, you go in advance, maybe a week, maybe 3 days. You get everything organized so that when his plane lands, you then steer him through the entire process, and you work the schedule out by literally by 30-second increments. It's an incredible logistical
So you had to have worked a little bit with Secret Service then.
Oh, we did. Secret Service worked for us, which is like a source of occasional tension because, Secret Service has their own manifests that they have to deal with, which is protect the president. But then some of us were like, look, this is a great backdrop. He can speak here, and then this is going to make a great front page. We got the president there, you got a flag, you got the buildings in the background, and they're, Secret Service will come up and say, yeah, well, you can get sniper fire from here, sniper fire from there, sniper from there. And you're like, yeah, but I can't keep him in a box. And they said, okay, just remember that when he gets shot, it's on your head. That's a little heavy. So
maybe we can work something out.
You can override them occasionally.
Wow.
But you try not to work that. You try to always create something that works for everybody because they're in an impossible situation. And if it was up to them, they just keep them in a box all the time. That's the way they think. But they know that certain things have to be done. So, it was interesting. And the Secret Service, man, they were such studs. I mean, they literally.
Well, you would think that they would have to be the best.
They go to the bar, whatever
there.
Hotel bar they're at, and they're downstairs. Girls are just like, I'm a Secret Service man.
Oh, they really? Oh my gosh! You'd think that they wouldn't be allowed to do that. Yeah, I think they would be like they're CIA or something. Just flout it. Oh, that's funny. Gosh, what? So
I got to turn the. They keep interrupting me. What is wrong? Is it my message that's on? No, FaceTime is shut down.
The kids are trying to get through?
Yeah, I'm going to turn off
Just
my
take
messaging.
the call if you need to. If they call back, it's fine.
No.
Sound like my dad.
I have FaceTime off,
fine.
so I don't think that's going to work. All right, anyway. I did that. Then I really didn't like the people that I worked with. So it's really weird. I have the message off, and it's still killing me. They are, when my kids want something and need something, they just don't stop. Yeah. So let me you can witness this. I'm going to send a text back to him saying, I'm in the middle of a live interview period. Can you patiently sit back for another hour, please? By the way, I wouldn't say it so nicely if I wasn't on live.
Well, I appreciate that
because
YouTube doesn't like swearing.
Get a white ass down, boy. Anyways, so I got a little tired of that and tired of those people, and I decided that that's not something I wanted to do. Perhaps I want to do something like writing, and so I kind of ventured into that kind of realm of things, and I was working at a magazine in New York called Interview Magazine, which is a magazine founded by Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol was not there when I was there. And then I ended up getting fired from that job, which was, to me, devastating. And I got fired for some really interesting reasons, which is, one, probably wasn't very good at what I did. So there's always that. But I worked for an art director, and everybody was screaming and yelling all the time. Screaming and yelling. There was drama. Now, I had just come, my last job was working for the most powerful man in the world. And what was kind of creepy is that nobody ever yelled. Everybody was like, we're going to go through your taxes to make sure you didn't cheat. And of course, that sends shivers down your spine. But they never raised their voice. Now I'm in a magazine. They think they're so important, and they're screaming and yelling and crisis. And I think they could just read on my face that I didn't totally respect them, that I thought they were a little ridiculous. And I think that ended up getting me fired. So
did they know your background though? I mean, did they know that you just come off of working for the most?
They could care less.
Oh, okay.
They don't care. If anything, by the way, he was a Republican, and they clearly weren't. So in their mind, there was residue that they didn't like. They didn't realize my job's just organizational.
Right. Has nothing to do with the party.
Nobody's even wanting my opinion if I had the opinion they wanted. But so it was purely organizational. Nonetheless, I'm fired. I'm in New York, and I've got this apartment, and I'm pretty nervous about how I'm going to pay rent. And my neighbor was an actor. And he was always like having a good time. He had a Harley Davidson, and everything just seemed so fun and easy for him. And I was like, what do you do? And he said, I'm an actor. And I didn't even know what that really meant, to be honest with you. And I said, well, so like, what do you do? And he said, well, for me, I do commercials and blah, 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 blah. And I get paid a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, you should try it. And I said, well, that's interesting, but I'm between jobs. Maybe I should try that. So I was shy. I was really shy, like not shy on a one-to-one basis, but in front of groups, I just did not want ever to be seen. And so I was terrified by the idea of this. And so I just thought, well, look, for no other reason, maybe it'll get me over that. I went to his agent. I had to read a monologue, and I thought it was terrible, and probably was. But she said, it's really interesting. You have a certain quality. You're not trained. You need to train, but you have a quality. So I went to the neighborhood playhouse where, it was it's a good school, good training. And I gave it a shot, and I got lucky. I came to LA, and I sort of applied certain things. And I said, I'm going to give myself 8 to 12 months, and if I'm not really getting traction after that time, then I'm going to have to veer into a different direction, because I really gave myself a limited amount of time. But I also knew that at that age, that's the age you want to try things. You're pretty, I was in my mid 20s. Mm-hmm. I think, 25, 26, something like that. And so I just got lucky. And I started doing commercials. And you said it was a break. It's an initial break, which was, there was a guy who shot a series of Pepsi commercials with Cindy Crawford. And he put me in like 7 commercials back to back. So I was able to get my SAG card. I was able to get all that stuff. And then it started rolling. And once people go, oh, he's in demand for these people, then they hire you for that. And then pretty soon you're working, and then they give you some speaking parts, and it starts to slowly unravel, I should say unfold.
It snowballs. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I started getting some shots at some TV shows, and I started doing some stuff. But the real break came with a miniseries for NBC called Family Album, which was written by Danielle Steele. And back then, miniseries were huge. They were like a big deal. They were the big epic that people invested in back then. And this was supposed to go up against the World Series. They had to have alternative programming to the World Series. That year, the World Series actually ended up not happening because they went on strike.
What year is this?
I don't even ask
80s,
me.
90s?
No, this is the 90s.
Okay.
But it ended up being a big hit. And it was the character, I don't know, for whatever reasons, people liked it. And it suddenly everything changed. Literally, I could get pretty much any appointment I want. I was on a short list to get cast for various shows. And so, it just started happening. And I ended up doing a lot. And I did something like 12 or 13 network pilots. And so when Stargate came along, a lot of people don't realize this, but like I had done a lot of work before that. And it was like my 13th or 14th pilot, Stargate.
For that season?
It was like my 13th or 14th time.
Total.
Wow, and I was
okay.
like, look.
And the 12 before 13 had not aired.
Well, but this was different because they said this is picked up already for a season,
Right.
and it's probably picked up for 2. And I said, I like that idea. I've got kids. I'm tired of doing these pilots. The good ones don't get picked up anyways. Let's do something that's like a bird in the basket here. So it ended up being a great decision.
Were you in Vancouver at that point, or was it a move for the family?
Oh, no. I've never been in Vancouver except for that show.
Okay.
I've lived in LA the whole time.
Okay.
And that was difficult.
So you had a place for yourself while you were up there.
Initially, I moved them up there, I think the first year. And then my wife at the time was pregnant with our third child. And she wanted to be in LA because she needed to get amniocentesis done because she has a genetic predisposition towards certain things, and they actually wouldn't do them in Canada. So you can't really travel when you get one of those.
Understood.
So finally, I bought a house in LA, and they lived down there, and I traveled back every weekend for 4 years.
Man.
Yeah, it was pretty
grind.
Everybody goes, oh, I wish I was the star of a show. And then finally you're the star of a show, and you're working hours that are pretty intense. And then getting on a plane the minute you're done and flying home for like 36 hours and coming back. So that was, it required a certain level of discipline that I've never really had to have about storing my energy and saving my energy. I was having to like literally anytime I got a chance to sleep, even if it was for like 15 minutes, I'd just go into my trailer and go,
take it.
And
absolutely.
Man, it was brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Joe, who were your heroes? Who's most responsible for making you the man you are? Is it family? Is it someone that you've met on your journey?
I grew up in a like weirdly non-entertainment environment. Like there was nobody that we knew who was in Hollywood. So it was free of any of that stuff. My dad was in politics for a long time, but I have to give credit to my dad. He was an older guy. It was my stepdad. I grew up with my mom and my stepdad. And a lot of people don't know this, but my stepdad and my mom married when I think I was like 5 or something. And he changed my name to his last name. So the name I was actually born with was Joe Dunnigan. Now, going from Dunnigan to Flanigan, I don't think anybody even noticed it.
It's an Irish thing, isn't it?
It was so Irish.
Yeah.
I went from one Irish name to another one. But my stepdad probably had the biggest influence on me. He's a pretty smart guy. He went to MIT and then fought in the war.
Wow.
Came back, graduated from Princeton, and then went to Harvard Business School. And so he was a really well-educated guy, pretty interesting, pretty smart. And this was the second half of his life. My mom was his third marriage. And so, and he said, God, I wish I had met your mom earlier. I could have saved some time. But it was his last marriage, and they stayed married the rest of his life. And he was an interesting fellow, and he was pretty old school. And so we didn't have a lot of television. We had a lot of manual labor. And he had a very, very clear sense of what was right and wrong. And he was not an easy guy sometimes. He's pretty challenging. And we had dinner every night together at a dinner table. And he would ask you questions about what's happening in the world. And he'd expect you to know the answer. And if you didn't, he'd kind of cook you a little. He'd be like, well, why don't you know? Your job is to have an opinion. Yeah. It's not okay to not have an opinion. It's not okay. Your job is to pay attention and have an opinion. And then I will challenge you on your opinion. And if your information is more interesting than mine, then maybe I'll change my opinion. So you had to be on guard sometimes. It was really interesting. You actually had to be on your toes. It was not personal, which was good. But you learned how to debate issues pretty passionately, but be able to walk away from it not being personally feeling like you've been trespassed. So that was interesting. And I think it made a big difference. Made a big difference. And I realized that when I went away to school, I went away to boarding school and college and stuff, there was a part of me that was more developed than most of the kids. And it was a conversational quality and my capacity to carry on a conversation at a relatively high level. And I could tell the kids who grew up around adults and who didn't grow up around adults. And I tried desperately to raise my kids in the same kind of environment. It's not that easy. So he had an influence on me, and maybe even more so after he passed away, because I think about all the things he said. And one example I want to give, this is interesting. I was in college at University of Colorado Boulder, and we were paying out-of-state tuition. We had family that lived in Colorado. It was very easy for me to get their address and get in-state tuition, which is a massive reduction in the cost of tuition. And I said, look, we can save ourselves all this money. And he said, no, that's not okay. Because the people who come in from out of state, they pay more money so the kids in state who don't have as much money can afford to go to school. It showed the way he thought about things. And it was something that some people would look at today and be like, wow, you're a fool. You're just a fool. Those are ethics that just don't mean anything. Those are just dumb.
Yeah. Why don't you take advantage?
Yeah,
there's an in there.
Dumb.
Yeah.
You're just dumb. You're not doing what everybody else is doing. And he just didn't believe in that. So to me, that was a pretty powerful, it had a lot of resonance, which was you do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because you're going to get a reward for it. And it's not the mentality today. It's wrong only if you get caught. Those type of things. And no, he wasn't perfect. I'm not saying he was some guy you could stick on a pedestal who hadn't made big mistakes in his life. Of course he had. But these were the larger macro ethical concerns about your place in society and his view of things. And it occurred to me that his experience of fighting in World War II and seeing the large tableau of America is what altered his political opinion. So he knew that the situation had to be fundamentally fair. And there was a moderation to everything he did when it came to politics or something. He knew that you had to give people a shot. And once that goes, the whole system falls apart. So I think he would be really upset by what's happening today, where people feel kind of hopeless and they don't feel like they're getting a fair shot, and the rich are only getting richer. And so, and he was a Republican. I'd be really interested to see what his feeling would be with Donald Trump. I'm pretty sure he would dislike him immensely and wonder what happened to his party. But that type of stuff had a big influence on me, because I'm looking at things today and I'm thinking, nobody's thinking about your larger part. They're only thinking about your thing. Only thinking about how it affects me.
We're all connected.
Well, it's remarkable the way Donald Trump talked about not wearing a mask. He goes, "No, I mean, look, I'm fine. I'm away from these people." Like, yeah, but that's only half the equation. How do you affect other people? And sure enough, he infected a lot of people. And so this mentality that how am I affected? What is in it for me? It's just only half the equation. And so, yeah, he had a big influence on me. And so it were guys like him. I was a history major, so there's a lot of people historically that I like. You know, I look at Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, JFK. I you know, the power to inspire people and make them be constructive members of society is a incredible quality to have. And so I admire those people. People who've gone out there and done things. I really admire Bill Gates, and not for his technical expertise, because I don't know. And there's a lot of questions about what potentially what dubious ethics were going on to found the company Microsoft. I don't know. I didn't want to get into that because I don't know much about that. But I'm looking at a guy who has so much money, more money than some governments have. And he is out there analyzing situations and looking at primary causes. One guy that had a huge influence on me was a Jesuit priest. And he said something to me I'll never forget. He said, intelligence is the ability to find primary causes. I thought that's a remarkably interesting way of describing intelligence. A lot of us run around and we get confused by symptoms. So, for example, even Donald Trump, we say he's the cause of, he's not the cause of problems, he's a symptom. There's a deeper cause going on of why we're at where we are. And the ability to find primary causes is really, to me, the sign of somebody who's thoughtful. And he's looking at like what the biggest threats are to mankind. And he knows for children, you know, starvation isn't the biggest threat to children. And, you know, yet the big charity balls are like feed the children and everything else. He knew that diarrhea was. But diarrhea just doesn't have the same ring to it when you're doing a black tie charity thing, the diarrhea ball. But he knows that diarrhea is it. And he goes right to that primary cause. I think that he is a genuinely interesting guy who his impact outside of Microsoft is extraordinary. And it's actually probably going to be a model that potentially rich and powerful people can follow. And if we only applied the same analytics to problems in our government that he applies to problems, I think we'd be in better shape. So
I look at
there are
him,
other people that influence me too.
and I look at Elon Musk. And
Elon Musk is another fascinating guy. And what I like about him is I think he really genuinely doesn't give a shit. He really doesn't. He's kind of like, I'm going to smoke weed on this show. I don't care.
Joe Rogan.
You know, and I kind of like, yeah, cool. I like that, you know, because you can become so hollowed out by your investors and your advertisers that you're no longer the person that you were. But the truth is, the person he is a maverick. He needs that freedom in order to get to where he needs to get. So, and who would have guessed 10 years ago that Tesla would be bigger than General Motors?
That too. And I will be there the day that he sends the first manned flight to Mars. So whenever that's going to be, because if anyone's going to do it, I think it's going to be him.
I might be on that flight. Who knows?
I wouldn't mind having Colonel Sheppard out there.
Ticket.
One-way tickets. Had you seen Stargate before auditioning? What were your initial impressions of the franchise? Are you a sci-fi fan? I did not.
Okay. Interestingly enough, and this is my mission, I didn't watch really any science fiction television. And in fact, I didn't really watch any television. And this was a weakness of mine. And I think I approached Hollywood with a kind of like this false snobbery, which is, this is kind of a joke, all right? Even when I'm successful as an actor, like what difference does it make? I'm just an actor. And then I really began to respect it and respect the craft. And then suddenly I became really interested and I realized it's like, wow, this is really, the world needs its storytellers, like the value of storytelling is so incredible. And I mean, and I really have tremendous respect for the whole storytelling apparatus. And I love that it's a cooperative. It's not like writing or painting. It's a cooperative. You have people in the art department, the vis effects department, the writers, the gaffs, the grips, the directors, the DPs. It's an incredible cooperation. And you end up with a product that is like been contributed to by so many different people, and they all have a distinct mark on it, and they all have their own particular value. So on that, I started watching more and more, and it really did help.
Is this after you got the role?
No. So this is what happened. So when Stargate came along, I immediately, my first thought was like, well, I can't really do that. I don't see myself being the right person for this. But yeah, I had in my mind Star Trek. I had not watched Stargate. And I was told by my manager, they said, no, this is not that show. This show has like a sense of humor. It's self-deprecating. It's kind of a wink of the eye adventure at the same time. And you can probably do whatever you want with the characters. Just do something, see what they like, see if they like it. And I said, oh, well, in that case. And then I reread the script in a completely different way. Okay. And I'm so glad he said that, because like when I read it, I was like, I don't know. And so I went in with a very different, I had a specific thing in mind. I went in, they liked it, and I did it. And so it worked out. And it was remarkably simple. It was one of the easiest castings I've ever done. It was like, went in, read, next day, offer, done.
When it's right, it's right. There's just those circumstances where someone comes in and they click. Christopher Judge had the exact same experience. He walked into the room. Brad and Jonathan were in there. He said lines, and they were like, okay, Teal'c, moving on. And that was it.
Yeah.
They'd also had trouble finding Teal'c, but still. When you got it,
the same thing. Apparently, they had gone through everybody and could not find the role of this character. And it was remarkable how many big names they had come in to read for this role. So
Ben Browder, I think, came in as well. So
did he?
Yeah,
did he read for this?
He was considered for Sheppard.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure.
I'm amazed at how many people have come up to me and told me that they read for my part. It's pretty interesting. And apparently I didn't realize how competitive it was to get that. So man, maybe that's good that I didn't know.
Yeah, maybe.
But then the next question after I got the role was, how the hell could you fill the role and shoes of Jack O'Neill? And I was like, who's Jack O'Neill? I literally didn't know who it was. When I say I was ignorant, I was genuinely ignorant. And so I was like, they're like, he's the star of FG1. You are riding his coattails. I said, oh, well, good. Well, will you personally thank him for me? I did not watch it because I knew that if I watched it, it might affect the way I wanted to do the character. And I wanted to at least get 1 or 2 episodes in the can and establish the character before I did that.
You wanted to provide a fresh interpretation.
Well, yeah. And I didn't realize, how big our SG1 was and how many followers there were. I was, again, naive to that. And so when the question came up just consistently, was a single most asked question. How are you going to be like Jack O'Neill, or are you going to be unlike Jack O'Neill? Or like, the whole thing was in comparison to Jack O'Neill. And after the first episode aired, I was never asked that again. So I feel like that's like a major success, because then when I did start watching, I had so much fun watching it. I loved what Rick did. I mean, Rick was so
unlike anything else out there,
incongruous and idiosyncratic. And I was like, that could have affected me maybe.
Yeah.
And that's his deal. And I love it. And our deal was our deal. And it's really interesting because there is a different tone to our show than the other show. And Martin Wood, who directed a lot of the episodes, he said, I look at SG1 like Superman and Atlantis like Batman. You know, there was a different vibe to it. And yet it's still part of the same kind of
universe.
Mythology. Yeah. So, and I would love to, and I have to say, Rick, it was hilarious. I loved ribbing those guys next door at SG1. We filmed, you know, they had their stage, we had our stage, and they were kind of next to each other in the same building. And, you know, for some reason they didn't have air conditioning and we did. And I'd walk over there and I'd be like, God, it's so hot in here. Oh, must be miserable. I think I'm going to go back to my air conditioned studio. And so it was just fun to do that. And so, but I also realized, like, my gratitude toward SG1 it was immense, because I've never done a show before where we quite literally, there was a built-in audience, and they had us fly down. We did the pilot. The pilot broke all these cable records at the time. I think it was the most watched cable.
It was indeed.
Ever.
That's true.
Yeah. And so when that happened, you know, all of a sudden people start making phone calls and they're talking to you and everything else. But we go down to Comic-Con. I didn't even quite know what Comic-Con was.
Yeah, San Diego, the big one.
And I said, why are you flying down Comic-Con? Like, literally, this was a Saturday. Our show had aired the night before. I said, don't we need a year or two to build an audience and everything else? It seems like a little premature. And they I don't even know anything, because you go through these back entrances under the hotels and into this thing, and then you just hear they're introducing you and you walk onto stage, and boom, I walk out and holy crap, it is, I don't know,
4,000 people fit in.
I don't know. Yeah,
Ballroom
somewhere
20.
between 3,000 and 5,000 people. This
yes, correct.
Standing room only, standing ovation. It's incredible. And I just was like, oh my God, we are on a ride. We are on a ride. And by the way, that was the same experience Jason Momoa had when he was joined, because he came the second year and he had never really been on anything that had been watched or been in front of a group that was that big. And he was like me, he was pretty shy about these things. And I just remember him saying, I am not talking, so do me a favor and answer all my questions for me, okay?
Oh my God.
And I remember that. And I was like, I go, you're going to get used to this. Trust me. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
It was just like me at the beginning. And then look at him doing skits on Saturday Night Live. It's a remarkable arc.
If I may be so bold, when we started talking with you, you were in your first season, and the answers, you're going to kill me for saying this, but your answers were often yes and no. You know, you were very,
were they?
Yeah, you were very, very clipped and very specific, and you got to the point, and there was minimal embellishment. And coming back year after year, we watched you learn the interview process and move forward in terms of verbally exploring the aspects of the character and production and everything else that went into it with people who were coming to set and getting in your space and getting in your face, you know, when you were trying to memorize your next lines for the next scene, you know, it's intrusive.
Well, what was particularly hard for me, and it took me a number of years to realize that first year was really taxing, because although I had done a lot of shows and I had been a regular on TV series, I'd never been the star or the lead, I should say, because it's not fair to say I'm the star of that show, because it's an ensemble.
It's an ensemble cast.
Yeah, but I'm the lead of this show. I'm number one on the call sheet, which means they're going to lean on me the most, and they're going to put me in the most stuff, and I'm working the most hours. And I think that, along with having and moving my family up, and it was difficult. I was short on sleep all the time, and it was really taxing, and it was very difficult. So at the time I met Hugh Jackman up there in Vancouver. Our kids started school together one day.
Yeah, because
And
he's
I
doing
didn't
X-Men.
even recognize who he was. We were just saying,
Yeah.
I heard his accent and stuff. We just started talking. It was our kid's first day of school ever. They'd never been to school. So this is their first day of school. And, a parent's first day dropping a kid off of school is like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
This is really nerve wracking. And so we were kind of like kvetching together, like, oh my God, I hope they're okay.
Right.
Almost like two mothers.
Leaving
right?
the nest,
And then we became friends, and he was shooting X-Men, I think it was X-Men. And I started talking to him. I said, this isn't fair. You shoot 2 or 3 pages a day. I shoot 12 to 14 pages a day. I have more work. I have less rest time. I have less time to work on my material. We spend less time like shooting the material. And it doesn't seem fair. Well, the truth is, no, they're working just as hard. They just spend more time on a particular thing. But he said, I said, I don't even have time to work out. I have to get picked up at 6 a.m. If I'm lucky, I get home by 9 p.m. And, it's tiring. And he said, you have to get up and work out. I said, yeah, but then I wake up. You're asking me to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and work out? He said, yes. You're better off working out and being a little tired than not working out and still being tired. And all of a sudden, I did that for 1 year, and it changed everything. Wow. My ability to talk to journalists, my ability just to be present on set, the energy I had, my overall just mood was very different. I was finally getting sleep, and I was just better mentally and physically. And that was what I had to do to handle those type of hours. And it really helped, because when I started flying back and forth between LA and New York, that's what kept me going. And so it was, he taught me a lot about that. So
was it difficult on the kids not
give it up for Wolverine?
Absolutely, for Wolverine. Was it difficult on the kids not being there all the time? Or have they handled it well? As adults, have they been like, Dad, I appreciate your sacrifice. How have they handled it?
It's still pre-FaceTime.
This is true. This is phone call only.
Kids don't really want to be on speakerphone. They don't get it. And so what was happening is that in your head, when you're a parent, you're thinking, this is a beautiful thing. I picture myself sitting at the edge of the bed when it's nighttime and they're going to bed and they're like, Daddy, what is God? Or Daddy, I had a rough day at school. Somebody pushed me. And then you give them a big life lesson and you do the thing. That's what you have these visualizations about what you're going to be like as a parent. Suddenly, this stuff is happening, but I'm not there. And I'm trying to talk to them on the phone about it. And I was like, this is really difficult, because my impact on these kids is so minimalized by the distance and everything else. It was difficult. And yet, those are the sacrifices we make as parents to help our families. So when people are in difficult jobs, I get it. But it is a lesson that when this pandemic hit, I said to myself, well, I am spending quality time with my kids that I might not otherwise be having right now. And so I try to look at it that way, because pretty soon they're too old. They're not going to need you and need to talk to you about all their problems and stuff. So I try to look at it that way. But that was the most difficult part of it. And Jason and I, also Jason helped me a lot. So Jason, the studio got me a 2-bedroom suite upstairs on this hotel.
Yeah, you lived together for a while.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. We weren't supposed to, but he came in.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, he was like, Joji, dude, can I stay in your room until I find a place? I'm like, yeah, no problem. 1 week goes by, 2 weeks goes by. Now it's like a month. And I know that the buffalo skins and everything else aren't leaving. My place looks like a cave now, but that's okay, because the truth is I love the company and I just love him. He's an awesome guy. And we were able to keep each other pretty sane. And it really made a difference having that companionship. And he was there. I mean, Christ, I had a kid that I couldn't get to when he was born. My father died while I was on set working with Jason. I mean, having him as my buddy and living together got me through a lot of that. And then he and I would fly down to LA almost every weekend together, and he'd see his family, I'd see my family. And you realize that there's no way you're getting through life alone. Like, you need friends and family, and you got to lean on them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I just had never been in a situation where I had to lean on people emotionally, and for the first time in my life. And I was like, God, I'm lucky. I got good friends. So
yeah. No, absolutely. And it must be just kind of jarring just watching his stratospheric success. I mean, you must be just tickled pink for him. His success has been tremendous and well earned.
It's not like watching one of my own kids succeed. It's that fulfilling, especially knowing him from the beginning. And especially knowing that he's a solid guy that really deserves everything, and he's not going to get disjointed by the fame. If he was getting disjointed by it, like, I'd be the first person to tell him.
Slap him down. Yeah. Come on. Get real.
Yeah, he's got his feet on the ground.
Yeah.
But yeah. Awesome. And by the way, it comes with a price. It's really difficult. So this quarantine, he was like, oh, I get to spend some time with my family. I mean, he's booked out like 2 or 3 years in advance. The idea of spending some time with his family was just not on the books. And so the kids would have to get flown to his location. It wasn't easy. And I saw him a number of times on various sets. I visited him up in Vancouver Island and down in Australia and everything else. It's a lot. It's my experience being the lead on this show multiplied by about 100. That's how much pressure is put on you. You're now a money maker.
That's true. You're making
big money for people.
Yeah, studios. And
I mean, his movie passed $1 billion. Your movie passed $1 billion. You're in a different level of Hollywood. So
that's almost like dangerous to even think about. Can you imagine the insurance policies that are taken out on you and everything? I mean, for a normal show, but now like this, especially with as physical as he is. And I mean, he's that way anyway, that's just how he's oriented, but the stuff that he does and gets to do, it's got to be very rewarding to watch that. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is.
Years ago in one of our interviews, you talked about the relationship between Stargate, the Circle, and the hero's journey. And I've always thought about this speech that you gave because I recently read
I hope it didn't come off like a speech.
No, it didn't. It came off as eye-opening, and I used it. I front-loaded it as the beginning of a new fan series that I did called The Phenomenon, where people were talking about how Stargate had influenced their lives for the better. Can you tell us about Sheppard and the hero's journey and the Circle and the cycle of the hero's journey as it relates to Stargate? Because the Circle, you said, is the most universal symbol in the world.
Yeah, it is. Interestingly enough, I mean, Joseph Campbell came along and decided to kind of synthesize all these mythologies and religions and find out what the patterns were. What were the common themes throughout all religions and all mythologies? And it was very often the same exact paradigm, which is a hero starts in a place, there's a problem, and he has to leave home. And he has to go out into this world, and he is transformed by his experience, and he comes back to share what he's learned back home, and that enriches life at home. And almost it's hard to come up with any books, movies, or films that might be different, right? I mean, they all pretty much are about a journey. Sometimes they're very interior, sometimes they're, physical. I mean, but it is the same basic paradigm. And the circle was, in fact, the most common physical symbol in all religions and mythologies. So you kind of come and you're thinking about this and you're like, wow, there's a certain genius to the Stargate mythology. They really hit all these sweet spots. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Stargate is very popular across the world. These are themes that every culture can relate to. I mean, you can go to Africa and find massive Stargate fan bases. and they were themes in their tribes, so all cultures look outwards, and dream of space travel or what space has to offer, what space means. It's the big unknown and everything.
Yeah, what's
else.
beyond your borders?
Right. And then you add in this one aspect is that it is in our show, it's a physical journey. So it's an adventure. So that really helps us in terms of translating into different cultures. I think there's a reason why certain genres do well across cultural boundaries, and action is a big one of them. And we are, in fact, an action film. We are science fiction action, but we're an action film. And action is easily watchable by anyone. And so what I found interesting is that I've heard from almost every type of fan, and one of them was blind people love the show. Deaf people love the show. And you're like, well, interesting, like blind people, what they love is in their mind, the voices are so distinct.
Yeah.
They can know exactly what's going on,
yeah.
exactly who's talking. And they have a very clear picture of what's going on. I mean, I can't tell you, I've signed a lot of walking canes. I've autographed a lot of walking canes and so forth. And I've talked to mothers and stuff who have introduced me to their kids who are deaf. And they're like, they love this show. And that's another thing. How many shows are so cross-generational? I've seen grandparents show up with their children and their grandkids who are all fans of the show. That's really hard to find today. There's not a lot of shows. They hit very specific demos, but there's very few shows that grandparents want to watch that their grandkids like, and vice versa. So that, to me, that was amazing. Like, that was a remarkable triumph without watering it down, And so I was kind of proud of that. Yeah. And just feel like, God, every actor should have the satisfaction of doing work and sending it out there and it being responded to positively, and you're getting feedback for it. You get to go to a convention, you get to meet these people, and they get to tell you, because sometimes I just think, God, my life is so ridiculous. I'm in a spaceship made of plywood and styrofoam. This is so ridiculous, right? What do I do? I mean, there are people who actually do things. I don't even think I'm doing anything. And then somebody comes along and they says, it's really interesting. I was in stage 3 cancer, and I was in the hospital for 3 months, and I watched your show back to back, and it helped me get through it. I hear that story so much about people that are recovering from something, that have been sick. They're in a tough part of their lives, and the show helped. And then I say, wow, I am really proud that I am able to contribute in any way, shape, and form to somebody's life being better. That's awesome. That is awesome.
Exhausting yourself day in, day out.
Yeah.
You're away from your kids. You're away from your wife. Yeah. You are dealing with 150 people on set, depending on you. And you're wearing that on your blast. You are having a blast.
I am having a blast.
Absolutely. But at the same time, you are creating content that changes people's lives for the better and that matters to them.
Right.
And how many people get that gift?
I don't know, but I'd say this. I have some friends that are more successful than me as actors that still don't have that. It's really interesting. They may have a better career. They may be making more money. They may have been done more projects, but they don't have that fan base and the fan feedback that you get specifically from science fiction. And that is something I'm like, but you don't have a science fiction fan base. That's the greatest thing in the world.
They'll follow you anywhere. They'll follow you to hell and back.
So, yeah.
Joe, I want to switch to fan questions here. And I have a lot to talk about with you about Sheppard and about the journey of that character over 5 years. I would love to have you back in a few months to discuss that further. Guys, I appreciate you in the audience waiting. And I cannot get to every one of these 7 pages of questions. I'm going to go through some highlights. Thank you all for submitting. Joe, we have 320 people watching right now.
Nice.
So you broke my records, my friend.
Yeah.
So we're in the second week and we're already at like 1,300 subscribers. So
now I got to make a plug for my show.
Yes, please do that right now.
I'm doing every day. I'm on day number 10 of my 14-day hotel quarantine in Toronto. I'm live streaming every day at 2 p.m. Eastern time.
On Instagram?
On Instagram, sorry.
Okay.
Yes,
okay. And what's the alias?
Joe Flanigan Official.
Joe Flanigan Official. Flani, right there on the screen, folks.
Yeah, Joe Flanigan Official.
Perfect.
Has a little blue check mark. Yes.
Claire Cowan says, as you can't get your normal coffee, would you ever consider drinking tea? That's how we start off the fan questions here.
Well,
the caffeine.
Because this is what I said, I'll clarify.
Okay.
She clearly watched one of my live streams, and I said to everybody, a lot of people are sitting there talking about, oh, it's rough. The actor's in a nice hotel room for 14 days. And I said, well, listen, you try drinking a flat white with almond milk for a year, and then suddenly you have to drink regular coffee. It's tough. It's rough.
First world problems. But no, seriously.
I'm experiencing true adversity here.
Jeez.
So the tea is, yeah, I could do tea. Maybe now that I'm going to take up meditation, I will get into tea drinking. So we'll see. But I don't know, a good slug of like oily coffee kind of gets me going.
Joseph Steinbrenner. Oh, I'm thinking George. I was like, wait a second. Yeah. Isn't he gone? Who do you wish, and I was going to ask you this, so I'm glad a fan gets to ask it. Who do you, or if anyone, do you wish that Sheppard hooked up with? Or do you think he was good flying solo?
Well, can I ask you why I didn't hook up with anyone? Well, no, I occasionally would have a love interest.
Right. But, for a while it was Elizabeth, and then, then we had people like Jill on the show. And right, exactly.
I don't remember the name of her character. But.
You had Chayasar the Ancient in season 1.
Right, and then they were just like one-off.
Then you had Laren and Travelers. There was something there for a while. But yeah.
I am convinced that I would go in and unsolicited into the writer's room and pitch them story ideas, much to their chagrin. And they were patient about it for a couple of years until I realized that maybe they weren't crazy about the idea. But I always thought it was funny to pay homage to other science fiction characters like Captain Kirk. So I was like, we got to get all Kirk about this. I got to go to a planet and they got a bunch of 6-foot-tall Amazonian women and they need help, and I help them. And they're like, yeah, Joe, that's a great idea. Okay, we'll look into that. Well, you need it back on set.
Hey, you did Epiphany, There was a little bit of romance in Epiphany in season 2. That was a great show. And that was a spiritual show for Sheppard, if there ever was one, in my opinion.
Well, let me just tell you, there's actually an interesting dynamic that a lot of people don't understand, that the consummation of a relationship on a show is a very different thing than the tension of a potential consummation of a relationship. So Moonlighting, for example, they never really got together. We don't think they did. We don't know they did. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. We kind of feel like they got together. We kind of feel like they got together. Yeah. And so, but it's the tension of unrequited relationships, kind of like, it's not, there's tension. And the tension is that it wants to happen, but it's not happening. That's really what you need to establish. So it's less about having the relationship and more about setting up the circumstances where the audience says, I want it to happen. So, I was it was, I think, originally meant to be me and Weir. And
it sure felt like that. Yeah.
Well, what I think is, to be honest with you, it's nothing that Tori was doing. I honestly think it was the dynamics of the show. Like, we kind of ended up becoming 2 separate shows in one. Those that stayed in the studio and shot in the
Gatrium. Yeah.
Yeah. And then those of us who were out in the field.
Yeah.
And so, and we weren't working together very much. and so they had to change that and figure that out. So yeah, and then again, I think my character, you know less about his backstory than almost any other character there, which was very interesting. You'll learn a lot about McGillian or Beckett and McKay, and a lot of episodes geared toward their backstories, even Taylor's, and even Ronan's, but you don't really get too much backstory. The one backstory episode I helped write, I can't remember the name of it. I want to say it was Outcast.
I think that that's correct because we go home and Ronan's with you. He's like, remember I told you about my ex-wife? Yeah. Well, here she comes. So absolutely. And we met his brother Dave, and it had just his father had just passed. I'm assuming your father by season 4 had already passed as well. So there may have been some life inspiring story.
What season was Outcast?
Outcast season 4, and that aired in February of 2008.
Well, the story is we're at my dad's funeral.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Let me see here. I had it up. There we go.
I had originally written that differently.
Really?
Yeah, and they went a different direction. When I say I helped write it, like it's co-written.
Yeah, Alan McCullough. Yeah,
but Brad also decides where the story's going.
Of course,
I like the idea of establishing a father figure, and I wanted to establish some kind of father figure, like a George C. Scott type of guy, that was a significant presence, and they just went a different direction. So.
I'd love to explore that later on in the show. If you were given the choice, would you like to come back to Stargate in both an acting role and or behind the camera? I suspect Sheppard's a general now.
Well, it's interesting because, and by the way, what I have to do is, I have to plug this in.
Oh, we're running out of juice?
I am running out of juice. Let me just plug it in really fast.
Absolutely. And while he's doing that, I'm going to ask you to contribute to our show. So if you like Stargate and want to see more content like this on YouTube, it would mean a great deal if you click the like button if you're enjoying the show. It really makes a difference with YouTube's algorithm and will help the show grow its audience. And it's already happening. We're already at like 1,300 subscribers. So thank you, everyone. But please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click the subscribe icon. And giving the bell icon a click will notify you the moment a new video drops, and you'll get my notifications of any last-minute changes. And this is key to if you're planning on watching live. And back to Joe Flanigan.
We're good. So
perfect.
What were we talking about?
Would you like to return as Sheppard one day?
Oh yeah. So here's the deal. I knew that I really wanted to come off this show with some directing experience. So I was able to renegotiate a little. And I said that I wanted to shoot 2 or 3 episodes per season for the remaining seasons. Now, what was really frustrating is that they came up with a reason every year why I couldn't do it. And the idea and the reasons would shift from, you're too busy shooting the episode to prep for the following episode. Or the next excuse would be, well, you're an American and we only have Canadian directors. We bring one American director in, then the entire tax structure changes and it's very expensive. And I each time would have an answer to that. Like, look, I will give up my acting fee, which will more than cover any directing penalty, tax, whatever it is we have. And I really wanted to do this. I was really frustrated that they didn't let us do that. They did not want to open that can to any actors. They had done it on Stargate SG-1. And to me, it's one of the greatest things you can offer an actor. And I say that because actors very often make very good directors.
Yeah, look at Amanda. She's amazing.
They know how to direct. Yeah, it's not a coincidence she's a good director. She knows what acting is like. She knows all these things. She's been thousands of hours on sets, tens of thousands of hours we've set on set. So it should be a natural fit. And a lot of times in the tradition of Hollywood is that if you have a show and it's doing pretty well and you're on the air for a while and the actor wants to direct, you figure out how to make that happen. There's a lot of actors that have just direct. So that was one of my great frustrations, is not being able to do that. And if I went back, I'd really want to try to get that in the can and get it done. And hey, listen, Jason's doing that. Jason's directing. They might be commercials and sometimes they're films and stuff, but he's directing his own stuff.
It's still experience.
Well, the truth is your life as an actor is much more capricious. It's complicated. You don't have control of anything. You are at the whim of this complex, interdependent web of people, and everything has to come together at the same time. When you are directing, it's a more stable life. There's more work. It's more steady, and it's not a bad way as you grow older to contribute. So,
absolutely. And I hope you get that opportunity. So if there's a chance for, more Stargate in the future, Brad's hoping to get a 4th series off the ground. I would hit him up. Kinvara Devonshire. Why? All right. Joe and I are going to be like winking at one another here. Why does Sheppard wear the wristband?
Okay. I just can't say why. It's like I can't reveal everything about this show. There are certain things that have to stay secret.
You know how much your first wristband went for at PropWorks?
How much?
Like $2,000.
Shut up.
I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
It was absolutely crazy. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you know what? A lot of people come up to me at conventions and say, "Can you sign this? This was yours." And I can tell.
I probably sold it. Yeah.
I can tell whether it's mine or not.
Yeah.
But PropWorks has sold a number of things that are not mine. I know they're not.
Really?
I know they're not mine. Now, they may still be marked as Sheppard.
Okay.
But there's nothing I wore, but so
interesting.
I can tell. I still have the 2 watches. Or maybe just one. I can't remember if I have one. I think I might have lost one in the fire. But I had the watches and I always was like, I'm saving these to sell for a charity or something, and I yet to do it. So this is the only thing I have left. So
okay, yeah, that was my next question. Someone was about to ask, did you, Ashley Smith, did you keep any props from the show? So you have your own watches, okay?
Yeah, well, I didn't keep that many props, and unlike some other actors, Jason.
I've got your ice cream cone phaser up here from Aurora.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Down here, I've got, you can barely see it, but it's one of your Game Boys next to the Stormtrooper.
Oh, my God. I like your blinking Enterprise.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, a friend of mine made that for me.
Very cool.
How much, how much improv or ad-lib were you allowed on set? We know of a few, like you came up with Chewie, which is perfect.
Right. Okay, so it was interesting. So basically, if we got the dialogue in the can, then you end up with a tag. They sometimes would write a tag like, okay, got it. And that's supposed to be the last line. But then what you do is you leave a little pause. So they got a cut place. And then I'd say, so make that happen, Rodney. And that's the last line. And then he'd be like, wait a beat. And he'd be like, okay, like, why are you yelling at me? And I'd be like, I'm not yelling at you. Like, you're just sensitive. And then we'd better and banter back and forth. And sometimes they'd keep it and sometimes they wouldn't. But it was a way of, you have to establish the dialogue. One thing that's tricky, a lot of people don't understand, is that when you shoot minimum of your master and then cover. Okay, so I have to get the shot of both of us, and then I have to get coverage of me and coverage of you, and there's actually medium shots in between. But you can't switch the dialogue, because if I say something, like, David, you're just, like, get up, and then it goes to you and you change it. You know what I'm saying?
You have to be consistent from shot to shot, because they're editing it later together.
So you don't have a lot of room. Just, logistically, it's not easy to ad lib. Now, having said that, there are ways to do it, and some TV shows have done it. Friday Nights Lights, they started something that was kind of interesting. I thought it would take over a lot of TV shows. They built big sets. They started shooting 4 cameras simultaneously. Now they're doing everything all at once. They're doing their master, their medium shots, and their coverage. And no matter what happens, they have it covered.
Because it's all in one go.
That'll be one sequence, boom, it's in the can. You do another sequence, it's in the can. Then they can decide which one they like. But there's nothing I can throw at the other actor that he doesn't have the opportunity to respond to. Because what you don't want to do is create one performance for your coverage and another performance for the other guy's coverage and have that emotional mismatch or even verbal mismatch. So, that's one way of doing it.
Yeah, you can tell when things are when things are poorly edited in certain movies or TV shows. It's like, well, not only is the person with their back to the camera, you can see their mouth moving in a different time, but the reaction sometimes is a little different. And if it doesn't work, it can really not work.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Amongst actors, there is a singular test of professionalism. And that singular test is how you do reading off camera for the other actor. And if you don't deliver and give them the same performance you did for your coverage, it's really considered unprofessional. It's really considered not cool. And so part of the I'm here to support you and you're here to support me is I'm going to read off camera and give you everything you need, even though I'm not on camera right now. And so, you learn a lot about people. And, let me tell you, there's a lot of younger actors who just don't understand the levels of professionalism. And invariably, the older actors that we had, and especially the more successful, were the ones the most dedicated to that aspect of things. It doesn't matter. I mean, I was doing a TV show with James Gardner, and it only lasted for a year. And this guy is old. He's been beaten to hell by all the TV shows he's done. It'll be midnight, and they're like, you can go home. I'm like, you can go home. And he's like, no, I'm going to read off camera for you.
I'm here for you.
Yeah. And so that's considered to be, and it's not like you have to do that every time. There are times you actually don't need the guy and you can say, go ahead. But I mean, it's considered to be a very important part of your professionalism. So
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Do you wish there had been more Atlantis SG1 crossovers? You appeared in season 10 of SG1. Do you wish that there had been more of that?
Yeah, I think I'm owed some residual checks for that. I will say this. I was a little wary of this. And here's what I was wary about. I was wary that I wanted Stargate Atlantis to be Stargate Atlantis. I didn't want it to be SG2.
That's fair.
I was a little sensitive to that. And so I made my opinion known that I thought we shouldn't do that many crossovers. And I was even nervous when Amanda came on the show because, and not because of Amanda, I mean, she's amazing. It wasn't at all about qualifications or anything. It was like, well, are we creating something with just a bunch of interchangeable parts? Is this simply an extension of that show? Or is this show kind of stand on its own? And, truth be told, you can achieve both. But I was a little nervous about it at first. I didn't want to make it just SG2. And I personally liked the tone we were striking in our show, which I think was a little darker than SG1.
It's more action. Yeah. But you also had, I think there was a little bit more humor in some respects as well. In some cases. I mean, you didn't have Rick, but.
Well, there's one thing I wanted to do. And maybe I might be saying a little too much by saying this, but what the hell? It was years ago. But there was some frustration among some of the writers that Rick wasn't gauging the danger of the plot lines sometimes to the extent the writers wanted it. In other words, he was like too playful and too glib and not like being like, crap, this is serious. We're going to die. And I thought to myself, well, part of the genius is his ability to kind of be idiosyncratic in those situations. But I was very sensitive to that. So what I was like, okay, I'm going to take the stakes of each show very seriously, and I'm also going to be a smartass.
Right.
You can do both of you can do both of those things. One doesn't take away from the other, and so I tried, to hit that. And so I think there was a little bit of a difference there about the seriousness of our plot lines and the stakes of our plot lines. Sometimes I feel like they felt a little heavier sometimes. I don't know.
But that's what you were going for.
Well, it was. And I felt that was like the respectful thing to do. I didn't want to like make light of the fact that the planet just blew up and everybody died.
Right. I mean, some of the villains, in many respects, I mean, nothing can stop us from raining our terror upon you. They're comic book villains in many respects. You have to have that ultimate evil every once in a while. Nowadays, it's a little bit more common to spend more time with the villain and really find out what makes them tick and find out what parts of them are kind of like you, which is kind of insidious and scary. But yeah, SG-1 tonally was just... I want
to say something. It's really interesting to me. And I'm not saying at all that we're the first people to strike this balance, because we weren't the first people to strike this balance. But in the world of science fiction, I feel we were one of the first people to strike the balance. That is now the predominant tone of like Guardians of the Galaxy and all these things.
Yeah.
Like they are doing what we did.
Yeah.
They are goofing off and having fun, and the stakes are serious. And I think, once again, I don't think we're responsible for it, but we were doing this before they were doing it. And the truth is that was the dividing line in my mind between Star Trek, which is orthodox science fiction television, and
serious. Absolutely. Take everything seriously.
Very much to make sure that I'm, doing this to the audience. Like, I know we're having fun. I wanted everybody to know that this was a self-deprecating. There was a level of self-deprecation involved, and there was a lot of discussion about that.
Well, it's a tightrope walk.
Before the first episode aired, there was very deep concern among some powers to be that I was not taking the show seriously enough, and that it was not good in that regard. And I fought back on that, and I said, look, that was my choice.
Yeah.
That was, you knew what I wanted to do with the character. And if you didn't like that, you could have cast a different way. But I've done enough pilots to know that I'm sticking to my guns on this one. And that's the character I want. That's the tone I want to strike. Because if I take everything seriously, I think it's going to be earnest and painful. So
it's interesting that you bring that up. I'm thinking back to when the pilot aired, and you sit back in the chair, and the chair takes off, and the solar system appears on the screen or above you. And you say, did I do that? And my mother had walked into the room and she said, oh, he's like the other guy. And I was like, I mean, they're definitely striking the self-deprecating humor and the kind of a little bit of breaking the fourth wall, being aware of that. Yes, this is a TV show and we're having a good time. But as soon as she said that, I was like, that's not fair, Mom. Give him a chance.
But once again, look you got the parents and the children watching the show together.
That's certainly true. And my dad and I, it's you discussing your relationship with your father. I heard very similar. I felt a lot of that as well.
It's the most common thing
true.
That I get told is my dad and I used to watch this. My mom and I used to watch it and everything else. And I do these Cameo things. And by the way, here's another plug.
Yeah.
If you come to Cameo, I'm donating proceeds to Rock the Vote. So try to join me at Cameo. But the most common cameo I give is, this is for my dad. We watched this show. We watched all 100 episodes together, and they're some of the greatest memories I've ever had. Can you give a shout out to him?
Yes, see, that's great. You're helping families connect. And mine, a Vietnam veteran and Huey helicopter pilot, a helicopter pilot of 40 years, was really cool on Sheppard, let me tell you. So, Jonas says, what do you think John's doing right now? Is he a general? Is he still out there on missions?
I'm going to say he hasn't gone up the ranks. And I'm saying that because I don't think he wants to go up the ranks.
Doesn't want to fly a desk.
Once you go up the ranks too far, you don't get to go in the field.
That's true.
So I think that he purposely keeps himself from being promoted, and he stays at a level where he can still stay on the field. And that's who he is. He's a guy on the streets, not in the office.
I can definitely see that. How is being Becky S? How is being the lead different than being it just says cast member? I don't think that's her intent.
Well, I think what she means is, what's it like being a lead versus a supporting character?
Yeah, bearing the weight of the show, basically, with the first name to come up is you.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that there's more pressure. They pretty much, like any other business, everybody's setting each other up to get the blame. And then everybody's trying to take all the credit. And if the show does well, it's great. If the show is not doing well, there's a lot of pressure. Having said that, all you can do is pay attention to what you have in front of you. And then there's elements that are out of your control. If they take you off the air for a while and there's a hiatus on the broadcast schedule, those are out of your controls. They change your broadcast times. Those are out of your controls. A lot of the storylines are out of your control. So you can only do what's in your control. When you're a supporting actor, there's a certain freedom that it's kind of amazing. So I had played the supporting actor in a couple different shows. And I remember that one specifically with James Gardner, where it's about the U.S. Supreme Court. And he's the Chief Justice and I'm his clerk. And it started with not that much dialogue. So I had to learn how to be present and make my presence known without speaking. So I learned how to really listen in a scene. And I mastered every listening little thing, all of it. It's great training for an actor. Because you really do. And if you give something and they can tell you're really present and you do something interesting, it makes the cut even if you don't have the dialogue. That's really good training for every actor. Because what a lot of people do is like, my lines.
And then off. Yeah.
My lines. And a lot of times, sometimes the more dialogue you have, there's a potential for not listening to the other actor. Because you're kind of like, oh my
you're working on the next one.
Gotta get now. When's my cue? When's my cue? And so the act of really listening, without as much dialogue, it's great training, and I think it's really good. And so it's a fine balance between not popping and taking a scene, which you have to be careful from, and still being interesting enough to be a cutaway. So. I would prefer being a lead.
I hear you. Now, and you have to think about
being a lead.
You have to think about the people who are in the editing room. You want to give them something to play with. You want to don't want them to be like, oh, here's a scene with Flanigan. Oh my God, what am I gonna?
And by the way, God bless those guys
because
I'm sick of myself all the time. I can't imagine being stuck looking at me all day long for 5 years. I mean, I don't even want to know what those guys say because they're watch out. He's going to do that thing he always does.
They've seen it all. So that's their job.
Have to put up with this. It's incredible. And so God bless them. I don't think there's a single person that you would end up really liking after 5 years of staring at them and trying to cut them together
for hundreds of hours.
So sick of them.
I can't say I would blame them. Yeah. 2 more questions. I'm going to let you go. Ethereal Nico, what's your favorite adult beverage?
Adult beverage, mezcal margarita. That's where I'm at. And I just want to tell you that. So last night, Jason FaceTimed me. And he's like in a velvet robe, and he's like, "Hey, what's up, baby? What's up?" He's got a beer, and he's like, God. And he's got a couple friends that are quarantining with him, a couple motorcycles in the background, some drums. He's like, "Oh man, we're having a party over here, man. Must suck to be over there in the hotel room." So I broke down. I had a nervous breakdown, and I made a mezcal margarita for myself. And you know what? I did feel better after that. So
Absolutely.
That's my adult beverage.
You got to give yourself a little comfort food every now and then, even if it's a
Right?
comfort beverage. So good for you. And, last but not least, I think it's fitting that Jack O'Neill asks this. Hey, Joe, what was it like to work with Meredith?
What was it like to work with Meredith? I'm confused.
Really?
Yeah.
Dr. Meredith Rodney McKay. Oh, Joe.
Oh my God. Oh, I thought you first I was like, oh my God, you're talking about a guest star named Meredith.
Nope.
And I'm so sorry that it's like, oh yeah, okay. I forget that his middle name is a woman's name.
His middle name is Rodney.
I think it's fitting. What was it like to work with Rodney? Okay, so I have so much to say about this.
Go ahead.
First of all, it was like when David and I started working together, something kind of clicked right away. And it was not unlike the road shows with Bob Hope and Fred Astaire. There was just this easy banter, and we were so different that it was really funny. And it was really fun to work with. And David is a really talented actor. And so I have to lay down the context really fast. I'm flying back between LA and Vancouver quite a bit. And I find myself occasionally sitting with Rick on the plane. And I remember sitting next to him and I said, so Rick, do you have any advice, now that I'm doing the show? And he's like, he can be a little gruff. And he was like, advice, like kind of advice. I don't have any advice. I was like, wow, okay. Okay, MacGyver. My God, MacGyver's a little grumpy, right? I didn't realize it wasn't about that at all. And like 30 minutes later, he goes, oh, don't do the gobbledygook. And I was like, okay, what is the gobbledygook? He said, the gobbledygook. The gobbledygook is all the sci-fi techie language about this and this and that you never understand. And you're sitting there explaining the whole episode. If you do it good, and if you do it well, they will keep giving it to you, and they will keep giving you more and more and more. And if you're not good at it, somebody else has to do it. Now, this was probably the best advice I got. So I was given some stuff, and I purposely sabotaged it. And I was like, oh my God, I think Hewlett is probably much better equipped to handle this type of dialogue than I am. And I'm not the smart guy. I don't want to be the smart guy.
He was in Mensa, or he could have been in Mensa.
Yeah, well, exactly. The
Right.
whole thing. I was like, look,
It's like, that's not cool. I fly helicopters.
Subterranean smart. And so, anyways, sure enough, Hewlett was saddled with everything. And it was hilarious. I have seen Hewlett laugh and cry and curl into fetal positions and freak out. The amount of work he had to do cracked me up. Now, it stressed him out, and I was literally laughing all the time. Like, I helped create these conditions for you. And so...
And thank you for entertainment for the rest of us.
And yeah, so working with him was a joy. And actually, I kind of thinking to myself, I have no idea how that show would be without him. I mean, he's just, it's like peanut butter and jelly. Is like just a jelly sandwich good? No, I can't picture the show without those two characters.
Yeah, he is in many respects the technical propulsion that moves the story along. He mentions the thing of the MacGuffin of this and that allows you to go, that's crazy. All right, let's go fight them off. Right, exactly. And I remember
and by the way, as opposed to science fiction movies are very big productions, and you can show a planet blowing up. Okay, you got the money to do it. Well, we don't quite have that money, so we have to explain the planet blew up for the most part. And so science fiction television, I think, is something every actor should do because it's very difficult. You're having to take a lot of material that's really complicated and address and say it in some way you're not going to lose people's attention.
Correct.
And David was able to do that like masterfully.
And
I knew I couldn't. That's
fair.
So I was like, you do it.
And we were on set for Trinity in season 2, and it's the episode where he blows up 3/4 of a solar system. And we went to his trailer to interview him, and he had no voice. And it was like, man. He's like, how about next week we do an episode where Rodney loses his voice? And he's saying it like this because he can't talk. And it's like, you poor guy. You know, he must have had at least 50% of the dialogue. As fast as he moved through it, he had to have.
Easy.
He made Michael Shanks look like he was standing still.
Easy.
So, Joe?
Well, yeah. Shanks did the same thing, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
So I want to thank Rick for really keeping me out of 5 years of pain and misery.
So on Instagram, you are available at Joe Flanigan Official, 2 o'clock Eastern time. Is it every day right now?
Every day till the end of quarantine.
So 4 more.
I'll probably do it every day until I leave Toronto. But it'll be day number 11 tomorrow out of 14. I think. No. Yeah. I'm confused.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I can tell you right now, I've been peeking into the chat and people have been saying they've been loving this thing. So in whatever form that you continue to take that, these guys are in. And we've been going for over an hour and a half now, and we've got 337 viewers right now. And what was the other one you mentioned? Where you're donating the proceeds to Rock the Vote?
Oh, it's cameo.com. You know, Cameo is this online autograph or videograph thing that celebrities do now that you can no longer meet people. You do personalized videograms to people, and there's a percentage going to Rock the Vote, so it's a good cause.
Awesome. Well,
yeah,
I appreciate you plugging that and taking, pushing that toward a good cause. This has meant so much to me to have you on.
Well, and we always said, all of us cast members, you've been one of the great journalists for us from the very beginning.
Really?
Yeah. Easy to deal with, and you ask good questions. I'm just worried about the batteries on your Enterprise thing. I'm wondering if they're going to run out.
The nacelles, my friend, are about to fall off. That thing has been sitting there for 5 years, and when I leave, the house gets up to 120 degrees. They are going. So,
yeah.
Joe, best of luck on sea. I hope to have you back again in 2021. Let's talk about Sheppard one way or the other. Thank you so much, sir. It's been a treat.
Thank you.
Be well.
Take care, David.
Bye-bye. Bye. Folks, that was Joe Flanigan, Major and Colonel John Sheppard on Stargate Atlantis. Thank you again, Joe, for joining us. This was a fantastic time, and thank you, everyone, for being involved in the conversation. I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to get to everyone's questions. I tried to get questions from people who hadn't had a chance to talk last time, so this was absolutely tremendous. Before I let you go, if you like what you've seen in this episode, I would really appreciate it if you'd click that like button, because YouTube's algorithm is very particular. And if you do like the show, it's going to help us do more and grow the audience more and get wonderful people like Joe back in the saddle for us to talk about Stargate and about life and everything else that's important and going on right now, but also to talk about the specific aspects of this and minutia of this franchise, which is, in my opinion, my intent of the show. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click the subscribe icon. If you plan to watch live, I recommend giving the bell icon a click so you'll be the first to know of any schedule changes, which will happen all the time. Now, bear in mind, clips from this live stream, will be appearing in the Dial the Gate and GateWorld.net YouTube channels over the course of the next week of special moments and clips from this show. So Joe is our first guest today. And we are going to be bringing in Brad Ellis and Wesley Walker from Wyvern or Wyvern Gaming. I'm not exactly sure on the pronunciation, but they're going to correct me. The Stargate SG-1 role-playing game Kickstarter is in full swing. And I've lost count at what the stretch goal is right now. So that is astounding. And thank you all for contributing to that. I wrote the foreword in that myself. I am very proud of being invited to do that, and it's going to be a terrific tabletop game. If you want to stick around for our channel, we're going to be starting up that discussion in about 15 minutes to explore the upcoming SG-1 role-playing game. I've got nothing else more for you guys here, so I'm going to get the next show ready to go. Hope you're joining us for that one. I hope you enjoyed the program with Joe, and you know what? We're going to see you on the other side.